Hey, so I finally got around to watching Spider-Man Through the Spider-Verse, or whatever the name is, Beyond the Spider-Verse, Inside the Spider-Verse, whatever it was called, and I very much enjoyed it, but I was a little taken aback when I found out it was part one of part two. And it was pretty disappointing, which is kind of on me because I wasn't nerd enough to know that going in, but it makes it also what I call a faux trilogy, which is one that is technically a trilogy, but there's something a little off about it, and I'm going to get into that. Some of the examples being Back to the Future, Pirates of the Caribbean, and the Matrix films. But before we do that, this is going to be part one of part two of Trilogies, which, yes, I know I should make it three-part, but it's kind of hard to do. And this time we are going to look at trilogy, series, universes, and how the through line can differentiate between them. Hi, I'm Matt, and once a week I usually break down world building techniques, tricks, and tips, but this time we're going to be looking at plotting, three-act structures, trilogies, series, and universes. Hope you stick around. So, side note, other than Spider-Verse being part one of two, there will be no more spoilers about Spider-Verse. I'm just going to be dealing with those trilogies that I mentioned earlier and some pretty big canon trilogies like Star Wars and Men in Black, Batman, Nolan's version of Batman, that kind of thing. So, feel free to watch the rest of this if you haven't seen Spider-Verse yet. And I had remembered, it was like, oh, I did a blog post about faux trilogies like a few weeks ago, and no, it was 2017. So I am, going back to that, and it's funny because in that time period since I wrote that, Matrix and Pirates were trilogies, and now they're both kind of series. And I don't know, it's kind of weird and kind of interesting, and it gives us something to look at them. There's also been 3 new Star Wars trilogies since then, and I'm very happy we have all these examples to work with. So, it looks easy about trilogies. It's just 3 movies, 3 stories, can be books, but we're going to talk about movies because that seems to be my forte. But it's actually a little more in-depth, and so we're going to return to trilogies in just a second because it is more than just 3 movies. So we're going to start with series, which are basically they're standalone films. They are a progression of standalone films with reoccurring characters. Harry Potter being a great example of a series in which Harry shows up, boop, 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 in each book. And each year, book, movie is one kind of individual stories up until the end. Fast and the Furious is another good one, as is Transformers, though I have not watched either of those. So if I do not make reference to them, that is why, because they are trash. Personally speaking, trash. Anyways, one of the things that's interesting about series and something to look for is that there's often gaps between them. In the Harry Potter series, there's always, the summer in between the stories. I think there's years in Fast and Furious and Transformers, maybe, I don't know. And it can have a through line, which we're going to get back to in a little bit. There are plot details that occur, but, the last 2 movies of, 3 movies or 2 books of Harry Potter involve the Horcruxes. That has become a through line. Defeating Voldemort has become a through line of it. So there can be a through line in a series, but there doesn't necessarily need to be. The rule of thumb is that they're also, self-contained. But as to series, they really do usually have years in between them, which is one of the things that differentiates a series that has 3 movies versus a trilogy itself. So like Spider-Man, Sam Raimi Spider-Mans have years in between the stories, don't really have a through line. Each story is self-contained. They may have reoccurring characters and, kind of thematic elements, but for the most part, each story can be watched alone. The original Indiana Jones trilogy, which was a trilogy for 20-something years until it stopped being a trilogy, but it's again the same thing, is kind of a series that has 3 movies in it. We'll return to that in a second. Iron Man, another example. Men in Black, just something to look for when it's a series of 3 movies or it's a trilogy. Universe, on the other hand, is, we're all kind of familiar with, like the Marvel Universe, the DC Universe, and it's basically reoccurring characters that share a same continuity / space. Marvel and DC, best examples, they're the Marvel Universe where there are 30-something movies, all of them involving the same continuity. All events are happening simultaneously. Characters will pop from one movie to the other. Less so and less successful in the DC. But there are other ones as well, like the King Kong Godzilla universe, which is an absolutely fascinating story if you want to go back to the old black and whites between the two of them. The first time they faced off. They actually filmed two different endings. The Japanese audience got got Godzilla winning, and Americans got King Kong winning, but that's another story for another time. And after Marvel kind of broke the code on it by making this universe, it was awesome. Everyone kind of jumped on DC. Obviously, didn't do it as well. Tried to make it after the fact, and it didn't. And they didn't have a Kevin Feige working on it. But also, a lot of people forget about the Universal Monsters universe they were trying to make, where it was like the Mummy with Tom Cruise and the werewolf with Benicio del Toro, and I think there was a Frankenstein, and Jon Snow had a Dracula movie, maybe? I don't know. There was supposed to be a universe there. That didn't happen. And I do remember, not everyone does, that they were even talking about trying to make the 21 Jump Street, great film, universe tie into the Men in Black universe. Yes, this is a thing. Google it. Thank God that died on the vine. So anyways, universe. Big collection of continuous stories, same kind of locations, share a universe. The difference between a series and a universe is the reoccurring characters occur in a series and don't have to in a universe. Well, they can, but they don't have to at all. And another thing to keep in mind is that universes, trilogies, and series are not mutually exclusive. You can have a universe with trilogies and series inside of it, or a series, inside of a universe by itself. And you can have like a series and a trilogy inside of a universe, Harry Potter and the Fantastic Beasts and yada yada yada, trilogy, series, same universe. Trilogies can turn into series, as we'll discuss later, about Indiana Jones, Matrix, and Pirates. And the Star Wars universe has 3 trilogies, plus several standalone films, plus a whole bunch of series and TV shows that all share the same universe. So in the big Venn diagram, they can be separate, but don't have to be. But a good way to distinguish between all of them is a through line. And the through line is a thematic, it's the storyline. It's the spine of the story. It is an overarching story that holds it all together. It's kind of like the prime mover in world building of like, if you remove the through line, then, it's just a series of events. The through line is the plot to a certain extent. And a through line doesn't have to be just the overarching plot. I remember Mark Ruffalo talking about how the Hulk in the Marvel Universe has a through line over the course of many of the different movies as he's getting more intelligent. And so he has this whole kind of through line arc over the course of several stories, which are not continuous for him, just within the universe itself. But for the most part, when we talk about a through line, we mean the overarching plot of the story, the story that, thing that drives the story together. So in the first Star Wars movie, it is the first Star Wars trilogy, the through line is the fall of the Empire. It starts with how the rebellion is, Luke is brought into the rebellion, how, Han and everybody, the rebellion is really getting going, and then more of their adventures trying to defeat the Empire. Empire strikes back, and then they finally defeat the Empire. The prequel trilogy for Star Wars, the through line is the fall of Anakin Skywalker and turning into Vader. So, yeah. Anyways, that is a through line. It can shift over time. It can be very long, like a whole season of Buffy was usually one single through line, and the next season was another through line. Recurring characters, things you return to, but each season had its own through line. There can even be thematic through lines. I think the Kevin Smith trilogy of the Jersey trilogy, which is funny because the Clerks also has its own trilogy, but the Clerks, Chasing Amy, and Mallrats, I think, were the Jersey trilogy. Anyways, but for the most part, we're talking through lines, not thematic. Back to trilogies, which is what we started this on, 3 movies, but it is more than that. And I kind of break trilogies down into 3 different types. The first one is continuous, which means the story takes place over 3 things, but for the most part is, it starts and then it just keeps going through all 3 movies. Lord of the Rings, that is a continuous trilogy. It starts, it ends. Yeah, it happened over 3 movies, but it was like 1 month for the characters themselves. The second type is a punctuated trilogy, which is to say there are many years or time between each of the stories. So they're all kind of standalone, but they are punctuated with time in between them. And then there's the third type, which is faux, the faux trilogy. Faux. Anyways, I read these words and I'm not great at pronouncing them. Anyways, as I said, continuous Lord of the Rings, which is funny because this is like the granddaddy of trilogies, especially in the science fiction and fantasy genre, and in which he wrote it as one story, but it had to be broken into 3 books because of printing constraints. It would definitely not be broken into 3 books, in digital printing, that kind of thing today. This way you can buy a complete set of it. But anyways, we'll get to that in our next video. Then again, punctuated Star Wars is a great example. Years between Batman, Nolan's Batman, very similar. I don't know if I would argue if it's a series or a punctuated trilogy, because I just thought about it minutes before I sat down to do this and haven't really thought it through all the way. So anyways, again, but the punctuated trilogies, each story is kind of separate and standalone. One of the reasons I don't think Indiana Jones counts as a punctuated trilogy, even when it was that trilogy for 20 years before they really mucked it up some more, was because it was kind of out of order. Each story didn't really have a through line to them. It's been pointed out that Temple of Doom actually is supposed to happen before Raiders of the Lost Ark, which doesn't really quite make sense anyways. But anyway, I don't know if that's true, but you can watch them out of order. The stories are self-contained entirely. There's no real through line to them. Same for Men in Black. You kind of want to see Jay getting introduced to it. That's kind of important if it happens first, but then after that, it's just a series of adventures. Each story is standalone, which is why I consider those more series than punctuated trilogy. So now we get to the faux trilogy, which is a fun one because I think I've made this up, and please forgive me for if I'm wrong. But it's really basically, they call it a trilogy. It's one standalone film, a lot of time in between it, or some time between it, and then a separate through line that takes place over the course of 2 movies. It's as I said, punctuated between the first one, and let's think of our exemplars for this, which will be Back to the Future, with the caveat on that one. Pirates of the Caribbean, yes, I know it's a series now, but the first 3 movies in it, and The Matrix, first 3 movies before it became a series. And it kind of makes sense that they're doing this, and let's back up for a second and look at structure. And there is a 3-act structure, which films love and trilogies love, which makes sense because it's beginning, middle, and end. So, 3. We do it in fantasy. They're usually trilogies. They prefer trilogies, even though, like with my own Gunpowder Flintlock fantasy story, is really a 4-part one. I have a video how to do that with post-it notes and why it's really a 4-act structure. But, so anyways, they understand that people really like trilogies. And so the faux trilogy starts off as a standalone film. And then it becomes, again, 2 films that are now continuous, and so there's going to be a cliffhanger right in the middle of it, and that is because of the 4-act structure. Basically, you need a cliffhanger if you're going to break something up. So you have your first standalone story. Let's look at Spiderverse, or not Spider. Let's look at Back to the Future, and then and then you have, he goes back in time, and then he has to go back to the Old West, and it concludes. Pirates of the Caribbean, standalone story, many years in between, and then you have a new story that is 2 movies long with a cliffhanger, with and same thing for The Matrix. 1 movie, standalone, years between, 2 movies in between. And when you do that, one of the things to look for also for a faux trilogy is that there's going to be a loss of MacGuffin, and then that cliffhanger that happens. For Back to the Future, it was they had lost Doc, which was kind of MacGuffin, and then he gets this letter like, what? Come back to the future. Here's the year that they did seed it well. I have to give them credit for that. Matrix, same thing. Neo, they lose the ship. My dream has gone from me, whatever it is. And Neo uses a new power out of nowhere, and then he is taken off the board. Neo is off the board, goes into a coma, I think, and they also reveal Smith is in a human form. Pirates of the Caribbean, they lose Jack, and then there's the reveal that Captain Barbossa is really alive, and I'm not going to spoil Spider-Verse, but it's the same thing. Big cliffhanger, big reversal. Well, why did they make a faux trilogy then? Why didn't they just make a trilogy in the first place? And it's because they never actually planned on it. They made a great original film that was a standalone film, Back to the Future. Caveat on that one being is that they had a joke at the end about, oh no, there's going to be more. But it was a standalone film that was shot with a stinger joke at the end. And it did really well. Same thing with The Matrix. Great film. Great film. And Pirates of the Caribbean. That I use some of the writing guides from the authors from that in my world building book because they are just groundbreaking. They just knocked it out of the park with that film. And then the producers get together, they go, man, that did really well. What if we make more movies? And they're like, well, yeah, and people really like trilogies. We should really put that into it. And, they do, because it'd be fools not to make more money. So one of the reasons that it is this punctuated story of events, long pause as the producers are putting together and driving dump trucks full of money up to the writers and stuff. And they're like, well, let's make this trilogy. So then they make a second film, and it's really one film that they call to, and that's because they can film it back to back, as were all those films back to back filmed because of the physical act and necessity of it. And they are trying to reverse engineer this trilogy, so we're going to go back to the structure and look at it real quick. One movie, first act. The second one is divided in two. Right at that midpoint, that is the reversal that happens there. And so that's one of the things that kind of feels weird about the faux trilogy, is that it's one standalone film and then two films that work together over one course of film, and it doesn't break in a trilogy like Star Wars does, with the beginning, middle, and end. It goes with the beginning, and then the second film goes halfway through what it is and ends abruptly, fortunately with a reversal and cliffhanger, and then you get the conclusion. And so it doesn't go into the 3-act structure. It's not quite a 4-act structure. It's a 1-act and then a 2-act. And it's just kind of weird. And it's not to say there's anything wrong with them. People are demanding more stories. Be fools not to give it to them. There's a lot of money to be made off of it, but the structure makes it weird. So it is one standalone story, then a punctuated period of time between it, and then one more standalone story over the course of 2. And then sometimes you have a trilogy with a faux trilogy that becomes a series. Matrix and Pirates are both great examples of this. So again, standalone story, years in between, 2 stories back to back, which are really just one, then another long gap in time between the next stories come over. Pirates, I think they even dropped some of the characters and then brought some other ones back, and I don't remember it currently because they get worse and worse as time goes on. And you have a trilogy of trilogies in Star Wars itself, and that shifts the through line, but we're going to get back to that next time. If you stick around for the next video, whenever that comes out, that's when we're going to look at the good, the bad, and the ugly trilogies. And don't worry, some of these faux trilogies are going to show up. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope it can help you build some better stories, if not worlds. Thanks.